Welcome back to Powered by Play. I'm Drew, and I'm a professor of theater at Chapman University in Southern California.
I'm Avery, and I'm a theatrical scenic designer. Every month on this podcast, we explore what we play, how we play, and why we play.
We believe play powers us, and that's what makes it powerful.
All right, Drew.
All right, Avery.
Press play. Food has been with us and before us since the dawn of life on Earth. It's part of the cycle of the seasonal harvest, the food chain, the web of intercontinental trade, the ritual of cooking and eating, the morning rush of the mom-and-pop donut shop or closing time at a Michelin star restaurant. It's everywhere, in our global economics, our rituals from festivals to funerals, and our books and movies and games. Are we really what we eat? How do we play with our food, even though our parents told us not to? We're here to talk about what playful food represents and why playing with it inherently connects us with who we are on the inside or the outside.
And I guess, Avery, the first thing we should think about is what is food to us as a society? What does it represent? The first thing that I can think of is it's nourishment. It fuels us. We have to eat. We don't have a choice. But we can make decisions about what to eat and how to eat and whether to cook or whether to have someone else cook for us. There's also an aspect of community and togetherness. You were starting to hint towards this. And also, there's a pleasure in eating. Because if we have to do it, then our bodies are going to enjoy it. It's going to bring us joy, it's going to make us feel full, and it's going to tickle our palates and give us some kind of sensation. I know that a lot of us are familiar with the phrase, you are what you eat, and I think that's kind of like drilled into us from a very, very young age that decisions about food are important. Food and drink, too. And so we grow up paying attention to what we're putting in our bodies. But I think there's also a spiritual element as well. There are many people who say prayers before eating. There are many people who thank either a higher power or even thank the animals for giving their lives if they eat meat. I found this great quote by Alan Wolfelt, and Alan says, "Food is symbolic of love when words are inadequate." I think that resonates with me quite a bit. There are a lot of people who express their love through cooking or express their love through eating. There's an aspect of gift giving to it. I think of that beautiful scene, Avery, in Moonlight, where the main character comes into a cafe and there's the man who was once a boy that he kind of fell in love with or felt desire towards when he was younger. And that man is now working in a diner. And this love interest, the camera just stays on him as he cooks a whole meal for, I think the character's name is Chiron, and he goes through a whole meal that he makes specially. It's off menu, Avery, and he's making it specifically for this man who he's seen again after not seeing him for a long time. So there are absolutely ways that love is kind of like, no pun intended, baked into the experience of cooking and eating too. And then cooking also, there are so many ways that it's performative, and we're going to get to a lot of those. Benihana, making tableside guacamole, mixing cocktails, even plating and making the food look a certain way so it's not just, I put this thing I cooked on a plate. The movie The Menu satirizes this, and I won't give anything away but by the end. But let's just say that there's a very specific way that s'mores are plated at the end of that movie. And I think also we have the difference that we think about between a home-cooked meal, which is about, oh, these are ingredients that are more or less fresh, and a person has been putting their time and effort into this versus fast food, literally fast, like you're trying to get everything put together and get it out to the person as quickly as possible. The idea of a food desert where there are communities that don't have access to fresh food or supermarkets, and so they're limited to fast food restaurants or convenience stores, places like that. But I think also one of the interesting things that we have experienced over the past, say 20 years, maybe 25, is the rise of the foodie, making amateurs a little more expert at how food is prepared and what the possibilities are. And food has become a little bit more of an art form. Subway sandwich makers are known as Subway artists. Wedding cakes have been determined by the Supreme Court of the United States of America to be a form of art. And so the idea of food, I think, is in constant flux. And part of what's changing it is people's relationship to it. Those were my initial thoughts when I kind of sat down to think about, okay, what is food really and what is drink really? What do you think?
Yeah, wow, absolutely. When you mentioned the scene from Moonlight, that reminded me of a play called Aubergine by Julia Cho. I saw that at South Coast Repertory several years ago. Basically, one of the characters has the power. I think he runs a restaurant where he has the power to cook the customer's favorite meal again. And the opening monologue of this play, it was just so powerful that it it was kind of like the character who was opening the show was just talked about their just favorite food memory, and there was just so much love and power and hope and emotions throughout this play. And I think the protagonist restaurant owner guy had to like cook a turtle to save his dying father or something. And yeah, it was really fascinating. It just goes to show how much power really lies in food. I mean, historically speaking, there's also been a lot of political power based in food as well, with how bread and alcohol have been one of the things that kind of keeps nations having been created and dismantled throughout the early ancient histories. Food to me also represents healing and restoration. Like I think of a campfire with whether it's you're playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and you're out in the wild and you just want to like sit by a campfire, cook some food, save your game, whatever. But also a campfire with like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts where you are just kind of bonding with marshmallows and s'mores. Food also reminds me of gifts and offerings. I was raised Buddhist, so my family had a Buddhist altar at home. We'd also go to Buddhist temples a lot, but I just saw every day how my mom and dad would put fruit, water, and rice, and literally any other good food in front of the altar, in front of these statues of deities, and they would pray, they would do like a little praying ritual when they present it to them. And that was just a really big part of my upbringing and something that I saw every day. With Buddhism overall, offering food is one of the oldest and most common rituals, where food would be given to monks during their alms rounds, which would be where a bunch of these monks would just walk down a road into a village, and then the villagers would just offer food, not out of charity, but just because it's a process, it's a ritual of giving and receiving. No one's really the giver or the receiver, but it's just there is giving happening and there is receiving happening. Overall, in Buddhism, offering food is this kind of this meritorious act that reminds us not to be greedy or selfish, and it's an opportunity for you to connect with the spirits. So I think that is also really fascinating. Food is also, as you said, it can be a love language. It's an act of service if you're making it together, but if you're just having it with other people, that in itself can be an act of love or connection or an opportunity for connection, even if you don't already love the people there. because I'm sure there's a lot of political dinners where you are going there to eat the food, but also like to network with other politicians or to try to get your bill passed or something. So there's probably not like hugging and that much compassion there, but the performance of it is also kind of part of the ritual and the process of it. I do also want to talk about transformation, which I think is a huge part of food in a lot of media and stories, where like the Mario mushroom is a iconic symbol for, this modern generation, where this Mario guy eats it and then he grows bigger. But as we saw in the Mario movie, you also need the character development to go along with growing bigger, and you also need to kind of master the skill at playing the game of hopping along all these different platforms. You can't just be big and then win the day. You can use the extra power that it gives you to bolster the internal power that you already have to grow inside you. And it makes me think of Alice in Wonderland, which is a very food heavy story. I mean, it starts out with this potion that's labeled "Drink Me," and Alice, who drinks it because it doesn't say poison, that she shrinks in size, and then she's able to kind of go into this door that previously there was no way that she could humanly fit inside. But I think it's just interesting that she just drinks it because she's like, well, it doesn't say it's gonna kill me, so might as well. There's a lot of bravery and naivete and innocence in that. And there's also a cake labeled "Eat Me," which makes her grow taller. There's a mushroom that makes her grow and or shrink and grow and shrink. And then there's the tea party with the Mad Hatter, where they're also serving wine there as well, but it's just like tea is a very English thing, apparently. They say in the story, it's always tea time, and we've no time to wash the things between whiles, and so all the tea stuff just is there permanently, which is unusual to say the least, because tea time's supposed to only be during a certain time. But if it's permanent, then you're really in this world where time and reality are completely absurd, and the change of day is just kind of twisted up on its end, and Alice has to figure out what to do. Did you like my English accent?
I loved your English accent.
I decided halfway through to do it, which you can
There you
probably
go.
tell. One of my favorite Nintendo characters is Kirby, who's a walking pink puffball, and he sucks in enemies, swallows them, and then copies their abilities. Sometimes he spits them out, sometimes they just dissipate into his digestive system. But as a result, there's infinite possibilities of powers and elements that he can use to fight other enemies now. Like, he can have ice powers, fire powers, electricity, and in one of the newer Kirby games of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, he can swallow a car, and then he becomes a actual car nicknamed Carby, and he can like drive, a bunch of roads and stuff. But his in-game world is also full of quote-unquote normal food, which restores health points as usual. But that's just another wonderful example of using food to transform, your ability. And I also wanted to talk about the game Hades, which is one of my favorite games. It's where you're playing a son of Hades who is trying to hack and slash his way out of the underworld in a roguelike dungeon crawler game. And surprisingly, this game features a lot of food. And, I wouldn't normally assume so, because it's just a very like, kill these enemies and then get out of the underworld. But the way that the world building laces food through it really represents a lot about culture and how we kind of use food in our stories to tell those stories. So, I mean, you have health points, of course, because you can get hit by monsters and stuff. And there is this one item called food. It looks like a fries in a sandwich, and you can buy it when you want to restore some health points, which is funny. And that's funny because, fries in a sandwich don't really belong in this Greek pantheon lore game. You can gift nectar or ambrosia to other non-playable characters, and when you gift it, then they become closer with you. You literally gain more heart points with them, and that they reveal more about themselves to you the more that you gift them. You can eat a pomegranate to upgrade your powers. And of course, the pomegranate is a symbol of abundance and fertility, life, resurrection, death, and the afterlife. I mean, I think it's referred to as the fruit of the dead in a lot of ancient Greek mythology, which also relates to the story of Hades abducting Persephone into the underworld, where she consumes some pomegranate seeds, and that requires her to spend part of her year in the underworld forevermore. And then her mother, Demeter, mourns that fact and doesn't give fertility to the earth, which explains the seasons. And there is a lot of food in mythology overall as well. It makes me think of the Chang'e Chinese myth with I think I mentioned on our previous episode, a mythical lady, she basically eats a potion of immortality that was meant for her husband, but she eats two of them to the point where she ascends to the moon and lives there forever, like she's cursed there. And then there's also Adam and Eve and the Book of Genesis too, with like eating the apple. Or I think my English teacher in high school always made sure to remind us that it wasn't even an apple or something. It was like a fig or a fruit or something. Because I think literally in the original book it didn't say apple, but somehow it became an apple over time. I don't know. But I don't know. I just named three women who got into trouble by eating stuff. And maybe that's another point about gender that we can talk about later.
Yes, you sure did. Wow.
Yeah. And then also in Hades, there's also the Fountain of Healing. Sometimes you come across a fountain, you can drink it, restore some of your health. Another example of a resting point, like a point of respite. And then there are friendly allies in the game, like Sisyphus, Patroclus, and Eurydice, who offer items to Zagreus throughout the journey. And Eurydice, for example, she now has like her own corner in Asphodel, which is like this fiery hellscape vibes. And she just cooks and sings all day and all eternity. And you're able to she just gives you an option of like an ambrosia delight or a palm porridge or refreshing nectar, so kind of like taking the other base items of the food in this world and then turning it into something cooked, which implies that the cooked food is much more enhanced than the raw food, quote unquote. And then the last aspect of the Hades part of my story is Cerberus, where Cerberus is well, this is a spoiler for the ending part-ish of the game, so be warned. Cerberus is a three-headed dog, and he's guarding the final gates of hell. And then so you're able to, instead of killing him, because he's a really cute dog, he's your friend, you've grown up with him, you're not going to want to kill this three-headed dog, but you can go find him a satyr sack, which is just like a stinky bag of vermin for Cerberus to eat. So instead of killing the dog, you can feed the dog too. So that's actually an example of an offering or like a trade as well. Like you're trading some food for your life and you kind of get away with it. And so overall, I thought that this was really interesting because this is a game that's filled with a lot of violence. Like you are killing monsters, and that is the vast majority of the game. But the fact that there's so much food spaced throughout it, that when you do come across it, it's rare enough, but when you do come across the food, it feels like a breath of relief after so much tense fighting. And I also think that that's what food is really all about. It's kind of all right, life is hard, let's take a little break to eat some food, restore ourselves, and then keep moving forward.
Nice. Wow, there is so much food in Greek mythology. You just reminded me of all those things that are part of those myths and how important they are. I just thought of something when you were talking about food as regeneration or food as kind of a stopping point. And I had mentioned in the beginning that there's a joy or a satisfaction associated with it. And I just thought, I thought of when we in the United States, I think generally when we enjoy something that we've eaten, we say, that was really yummy, or that was really good. And that kind of has these connotations of the food gave me pleasure. But when my British friends really like something that they eat, they'll sometimes say, oh, okay, now I'll try an English accent. Oh, that was nice. oh, that was so nice. Or, oh, that was gorgeous. That was lovely. Almost like they're personifying the food.
Wow.
You know? And I it has always struck me as just kind of, I don't know whether it's quaint or whether it's just kind of quirky or fun, but that
Wow.
expression of enjoyment has always kind of, given me pause. And as we sort of transition and we talk about, well, how do we use food to express ourselves, or how do we use food to be ourselves? I would be remiss if I didn't talk about kind of my spiritual childhood growing up, which was pretty liberal Protestant Christian, but we did have communion. And so for Catholicism, this would be the Eucharist. And it's a reenactment of the Last Supper. So Jesus and his disciples, and he gave them food. And the important components here are bread and wine, and, or as they sometimes say, bread and the cup, because kids who are getting communion are not going to be drinking wine. But so, and the bread turns into, in metaphoric, or if you're strictly looking at Catholic beliefs, literally for the priests who eat it and drink it, to the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. So the body, and it's always phrased as, this is my body broken for you, take and eat and remember me. And this is my blood shed for the remission of sins, take and drink and remember me, right? So it's sacrifice, Avery. It's a kind of, and it's a ritual. There's a little bit of play in that ritual, and it's always been very interesting to me. So it's the way that you continually reaffirm your beliefs in either the divinity of Jesus Christ, or at least the importance of his teachings and the importance of his sacrifice. So, I mean, woven into so many spiritual experiences. And then the question of sort of, how do we define who we are by what we eat? I look at Anthony Bourdain, the great and very missed Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations, and all of his shows where he went from culture to culture to culture and wanted adventures and wanted to learn about the culture through how they cooked, how they ate, what they cooked, what they ate, and just expressing how much we could learn simply by sitting down with people and sharing a meal with them. There are food tours. I just did a food tour in Denver when I was there with my daughter, looking at local delicacies, the history of the food in the region. And on a food tour, typically what you're going to eat is a mystery until you're actually on the tour and you're going to the restaurant. So everything is kind of a surprise. And then there's drink. There's the use of alcohol and what that says about a society or a culture. I know in many societies, the legal right to drink alcohol is part of a sort of a rite of passage and a rite of establishing responsibility. And it's very woven into cultures that alcohol is used to sort of enhance the calming down after a long day, or numbing out if there's something. A lot of people would say this is alcohol being used as a crutch, or this is alcohol being used in a way that's not about enjoying the alcohol for what it actually brings to the palate, but rather the effect that it has on the body. But of course, overuse can lead to a whole myriad of problems. And so part of that rite of passage, I suppose, is figuring out what are your limits. And the idea of, there was this old episode of Columbo, Avery, where the villain scratched on the bottle of whatever alcohol he had. He took like a coin and made a scratch because he knew that he could drink only that much alcohol. And so the phrase in that show was this far and no farther. And I think that's kind of the rite of passage as well. But I mean, in the modern day, there's a huge and growing sober curious movement. There's also a movement for mocktails. So if you want to get together with friends who are drinking, but you don't drink, there's something special for you. You don't have to just sit down and say, okay, well, I'll have a cherry Coke or whatever, something that is available everywhere. You can say, what do you have as a mocktail, as a special non alcoholic drink that I can have fun with too? And there's also, I'm reading tons and tons of new research indicating that any use of alcohol has detrimental effects and lasting effects. And so this is part of sort of looking at the danger of play. And it used to be that the medical institutions would say, well, having some red wine is good for heart health. So in moderation, it's fine. And we're learning more and more every day about kind of how this rite of passage or how this playful use affects our bodies. But in the meantime, I mean, there are so many wine tours, wineries, pairings, and use of alcohol to indicate sort of a regional affiliation. I think of tequila. I mean, tequila, the classic tequila, and people saying, "Oh, I'm at a Mexican restaurant, so I want a margarita," and it's just kind of like automatically there. Or vodka, Eastern Europe, Russia, or Scotch. I mean, my goodness, Ireland and Scotland and Scotch and how it's woven into the culture there is just it's so old, and it's so much a part of the history and how celebrations happen and all kinds of other things. So when that was what I put together when I was thinking about what does eating and drinking say about us.
Fascinating. When you mentioned the connection between food and different cultures, I instantly thought of Thai tea, that orange, sweetish, savory-ish drink that is at every single boba shop that you'll ever come across, but also at a lot of Asian, Vietnamese, or Thai restaurants and cuisines that they'll just have that, and you kind of know that it's going to be there. Another Vietnamese thing is cafe soda, which is Vietnamese. It's milk coffee, basically, and it's a very specific, Vietnamese staple culture blend, kind of thing that I had a ton when I was visiting in Vietnam. I think I had it mostly every day, and now when I try to have it in the States, I try to like compare and see how they all represent, that food idea of that best Vietnamese coffee or not. I think food also plays with a lot of different connotations around socioeconomic class. There's some internet videos of people who are like, watch me prep food or cook food as a personal chef for a millionaire in the Hamptons or Beverly Hills or wherever. And you just see this person just cooking in a really nice kitchen with like their headphones on and making really good food, and you're like, oh wow, could I ever be a personal chef and make a lot of money from that? That seems pretty interesting. And then there's other videos that are like, watch me prep or cook food for a very expensive picky client, and then at the end of the video the client is revealed to be the person's dog or their pet or like their bearded dragon or something. And I also find that very hilarious too.
That is amazing, Avery.
Yeah, because some of their dogs, they do like a very special tray. They do layers of different kinds of foods and meats and some raw food and like an egg, or but sometimes they don't like it in the green bowl. They only want it in a different bowl. Yeah, it's very funny. When I see those videos, sometimes it helps me find another way to play with how I cook my food because I'm not a huge fan of cooking. I will confess, I cook like a undergraduate college student, and I my strongest cooks are probably eggs, like omelet. I can do omelets, I can do soft-boiled eggs, I can do scrambled. I can cook rice in a rice cooker. Like, I'm pretty basic when it comes to it, due to mostly my motivations around it. But when I put on my headphones and I focus in and I'm like, chop, 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 I'm cooking this for a very picky client. Even if that picky client is me, it's kind of role playing an element of class or service for, someone else in a way that kind of benefits yourself. So I think that's an interesting way to play around with cooking as a job, but it's a cool job if you're getting paid a lot of money for it. So why don't you just pretend that you're getting paid a lot of money for it and then reap the emotional benefits of that? There's also ideas around how food motivates us as a character or as a creature. There's this game called Pizza Possum. You are a possum and you run around town stealing and eating all of the pizza and other food that you can find without getting caught. And if that's not a perfect representation of like the criminalization of stealing food, but also the inborn need to steal something that you need to survive. But I don't know, I think this possum is also like really not only wanting to survive, because if they wanted to steal food, they could just steal it out of garbage cans, but they want to steal like nicely cooked really good food. And so I don't know, so there's like a criminal aspect to it, but it's also comedic because you were a possum. It makes me think of the Disney Channel characters Zack and Cody from Sweet Life on Deck or The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, where Zack, the twin, he is not book smart, but he is motivated more by food. And it reminds me of like being motivated by your id, which is your base desire according to Freudian psychoanalysis. And then the twin named Cody is more restrained, he's more clever, he's very book smart, he wants to get straight A's, and he's led by his morals, which is very super ego Freudian of him. And that's kind of an interesting dichotomy where the one who's not as smart, the one who's a little bit chubbier, is the one who's more food motivated. And this actually represents a lot of negativity around how food is connected to your character that the media portrays. So a lot of media messaging, especially in a lot of media for children, is that if you eat too much food, you're not very appealing or attractive, and you're the comedic relief side character. And there's a ton of examples of this where this comedic relief side character is fat, they're lazy, they're a slob, they have poor impulse control around food, they're lower in intelligence, and it's very centered around like the food, the food, the food. You can see this in characters such as Dudley in Harry Potter, in the Sweet Life series, there's Kirby the security guard, there's Woody, the other classmate. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Augustus Gloop, the kid, there's literally a song linking his weight to his behavior. The singers say, "The great big greedy nincompoop, Augustus Gloop, so big and vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile." Like, dang. That is sung about
Yeah,
a kid.
dang.
That is
Yep.
cruel. And it's not cruel to be fat or like to acknowledge that someone is fat, but it's cruel to tie fatness to being a greedy nincompoop and being vile. Like, anybody can be greedy, foul, and infantile, regardless of their weight. So it's just an extra unnecessary thing to tie that to their weight as well. And in Pixar's Ratatouille, you have Remy, who's kind of the hero, the lead. He's obsessed with good quality food, and that's his entire passion. But Emile, who's described as just Remy's gluttonous older brother, he's obsessed with any food, and he's a lot chubbier, and he's just kind of depicted as just kind of a glutton. Like, he's chill with eating like literally any food ever, and he's not obsessed with good food in the way that Remy is. And Emile is basically enjoying food in the wrong way, according to Remy. In WALL-E, all the humans are fat in this dystopian movie, and they're depicted as quite pitiable as well. Like, they don't walk, they're just all in chairs watching entertainment all day. in Ursula's song in The Little Mermaid, I Want the Good Times Back, she describes how she was banished from the other guy's universe. What's his name? Neptune? Uh,
Titan?
Triton. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
She's banished from Triton's kingdom, but the thing that she says she misses the most about the time before she was banished was eating as much as or whatever she wanted. Like the lyrics say, there's just one teensy thing that I want. I want the good times back. I want the wild soirees. I want those trembling crowds of shellfish cracked and peeled for me to dine. Not because I'm mean or selfish. I only want what's mine. I'm not a Broadway singer, unfortunately.
Wait, they rhymed shellfish with selfish?
Yeah, they do.
That is wow. Okay. All right. You got to hand it to him. That's a pretty darn good one.
Yeah. So it's kind of a song that basically says, my gosh, my only crime was wanting to eat everything. Why was that such a crime? I want that back. And that there's a lot of theming around eating and womanhood and femininity as well, where especially with what is it in the movie Mean Girls, there's a lot of themes and bullying around weight and weight loss and dieting and stuff like that. And in She Loves Me, the musical from like 1960s Broadway, it's a 1930s perfumery rom-com, kind of deal. And there's a song where one woman is selling a music box to another woman, and Amalia, she's trying to become a salesperson, so she's proving herself. She tells the woman, like, this is a box that plays music. It's a candy box. And there's a whole song about this box will prevent you from eating too much candy because the music will remind you when you open it that, you're eating too much. And they both kind of relate to that a lot. So maybe
Hmm.
it could be like a pseudo commentary on woman to woman, society always expects us of this, but she's also using that societal expectation to sell this item that the woman probably did not need. In fact, the woman was not interested at all until Amalia brought up the eating candy problem. And throughout all of this, a lot of our heroes in our modern media are like athletic, they're sporty, or they're manly, they're popular and successful. And oftentimes, even our heroes in our stories, or our parents, or our peers, will mock fat characters and have fatness and eating be feared and shamed. And TV for children is supposed to be social education. It's not just entertainment. When children watch TV shows, whether it's Disney or cartoons or anything else, they are learning about how the world works, how it is supposed to be working, and how to navigate it and all of its problems. And when you tie food and eating food to such negative stereotypes and cliches in every single thing, naturally your your citizens of the world who are watching this are going to grow up and associate being fat with being negative. But what media should be saying is that being fat and being healthy are not mutually exclusive, and it is okay to be fat, and it is okay to exist in the body that you have.
Yeah, you're right. There's so much sort of good and bad, right and wrong associated with actions that characters take. And going way, way back to Aristotle, the way we, like you said, the way we learn, the way we're socialized is by watching the choices that characters make. And what's interesting to me is that kids are getting this message of, okay, don't eat too much, but you need to eat. And clean your plate, kid. Make sure that you eat everything that was put in front of you. And when I going to my Gen X upbringing now, and I think even after that was a racially tinged sort of parental motto, which was Eat everything on your plate. There are kids who are starving, particularly in China. There are kids who are starving in China who would love to have that food. And this is something that's kind of like it's interesting because it looks at how it looks at privilege, it looks at not being wasteful, but also there's that, okay, but don't overdo it, right? Don't, yes, you're supposed to eat, you have to eat, but make sure that you are not overindulging. So these two things that kids are almost being taught at the same time that are kind of opposite and distinct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we also have a few questions about when does food intersect with entertainment? And I had a lot of fun putting some of these things together. And how does food become part of narrative performance or become part of a performance that is part of people gathering? So I will bring a few things up here. Okay, so there are some scripts in which food is literally cooked on stage. Famously, in the British play Skylight, one of the main characters cooks spaghetti, and it's like a real time thing where she starts cooking spaghetti at the beginning of the play, and then at some point in the play, she has cooked it and she's serving it, and she and the other character are eating it. So, anyone who's in, you have to have a real working stove, of course. And when the actor is saying her lines and doing all of this, she's doing so while also paying attention to what she's cooking. So that's one of them. In the play Clyde's,
Oh my gosh! Sorry.
they are,
Yeah!
yeah, Clyde's. They're in a sandwich shop. They're in a sandwich shop, and the characters are constantly making sandwiches the entire way through. And you can smell in the. I saw this at the Mark
Oh my god,
Taper
I saw
in
it
Los Angeles.
too! It was
Woohoo!
life-changing. The amount of
It
food
was.
props that they had was absolutely
I
ridiculous.
know. I know. It was just absolutely wild. And so you could smell every single thing that they were cooking and all of the stuff that they were putting together. And when I was in Seoul, I went to this show with my partner and my daughter called Nanta, Nanta. And this is a show that's been running in Seoul for a long time. And the basic idea is they are cooking food for a wedding and they have less time than they thought they did. And so they are making everything on stage, and they literally have a clock that they set at the
Oh my
beginning that's
gosh.
going to be the real time that oh man, it is amazing. When it talk about life changing, this is one of the most life changing shows I have ever seen. Not because it was deep and there were intellectual topics being debated or anything, but because of everything that the actors were doing and just the pure joy of this show. And what I really remember them making was bulgogi. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that's the first thing that they make. And man, they are on stage like dancing and chopping and frying and all this other stuff. And it is just absolutely astonishing. And they specifically say in the program that none of the bulgogi and none of the food that they make on stage is wasted because they bring it to food donation sites to feed people who are hungry in different regions in Seoul. So every night they bring it and it's given to people who need the food. So nothing's wasted on stage. But speaking of waste, there are some performances that are a little bit about an excess or a waste of food. You were talking about power earlier. And there's an author named Joseph Roach who wrote a great book called Cities of the Dead. And one of the things that he was kind of putting forward was that societies display their power by having things, particularly food, in excess or being able to waste food. So here I think of the classic Hawaiian luau. and more food than anyone who's at the luau could possibly eat. But it's all spread out there for you. You've had usually a pig that's been roasted in a pit for a number of hours, and that is kind of like dug out of the pit and brought through the audience typically. And so it's a part of heritage, a part of togetherness. In Hawaii these days, there's a touristy element to it. It's kind of like, join us, see what we do here when we have a celebration. And so, literally, slaughtering an animal is part of that celebration. And then for my last look at performance, Japanese maid cafes. So my daughter and I went to the at-home cafe in Tokyo. So a maid cafe, I mean, there's a whole, I cannot even begin to describe how maid culture is woven into Japanese culture, especially as an outsider. I'm just kind of there as someone who is interested and curious and looking in and seeing what's going on. So at the Maid Cafe, Freudian slip, Mad Cafe. At the Maid Cafe, the servers come around, and so the servers are dressed in maid outfits. So classic Japanese maid outfits. The idea is, I am here to serve you. Tell me what you need. And there's, of course, a gendered aspect to this as well. And so when you come in and you order your food, not only do you order the food that's going to arrive at your table, but you also choose from a menu a maid who is going to be, so you order a maid who is going to be your maid for your experience there at the cafe. And there's a little performative aspect. So you come up on stage and you make the little heart gesture with your hands and you have your photo taken with your maid, and they do a little light show and a little sort of everybody in the cafe sort of cheers and stuff like that. But this is not something that is limited to straight young men or gay women who want to order a maid. There are families. We were sitting next to a family who was there for a birthday party. And so there were kids, like elementary school age kids, and the kids were ordering their particular maid from the menu, and everybody, the parents and the kids, got to order a maid that was going to be their maid for the birthday party experience. So again, woven into Japanese culture and goes way, way deeper than what I've been able to describe, but just a fascinating confluence between food and performance.
Wow, fascinating, yeah. It is certainly a huge design aspect to even have food as part of the experience as well. I just think of the ways that my dad would always buy us snacks and stuff while we were having little outings as a kid so that we could, quote, remember or enjoy the experience. And that was always something that stuck with me, as we didn't always want to afford souvenirs or, all the trinkets that cost a lot. But if we went to this plaza for a day and we'd walk around Barnes and Noble, we'd walk around some of the shops, but he would buy us like an ice cream or a slice of cheesecake for us all to share, and we would like sit and enjoy it. And he always inspired me to consider that as part of what a nice time out involves. I also think of the night market that a lot of Asian countries have. I've been to a night market in Cambodia. I've been to a bunch back in Orange County. There's some at the Asian Garden Mall where you would have music and stalls full of food. There's also events in OC like the 626 night market or other kind of Lunar New Year events as well, where food is often, it can even be like a huge drawing point where there's lots of lines outside all of the food stalls But you get, like, all this really unique food from different vendors, and a lot of them cook it right in front of you, so it smells amazing, and that's kind of just a really large percentage of what those festivals and Asian kind of nighttime activities feel like, and the food gives you the energy to keep exploring and enjoying yourself while you continue to look at the other things around you. I also recently watched the Quiet Place Day One movie, and in the movie theater, and the lady in front of me at one point, she took a bite of something during like a quiet moment, and I had such a hard time stifling my laughter. It was like a celery or carrot crunch. Like it was unique. I had no idea what it was still, but it was so funny. And I saw the silhouette of her husband or her companion or whatever, like turn his head toward her in like a dude, what the heck kind of way. And she like looks back at him like, what the heck? I'm just trying to enjoy my snack. And he's like, everybody else is trying to enjoy this movie called Quiet Place. And it's really funny. And, there like, in movie theaters, there's always the inseparable food and location/activity connotations. I wanna play a game where I list a location, and then you can say, the food item that it's associated with. Are you down?
I'm down for that. I've got a couple for you too.
Okay, oh, okay.
Ah,
Movie theaters and
popcorn,
Disneyland and
Dole Whip, churros,
okay. Yeah, I was always
um,
more of a churros, uh-huh.
yeah, Mickey Mouse pancakes or waffles
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
ice cream sandwiches,
Yeah. You got shopping malls and
Cinnabon, or pretzels.
those are both super accurate. I forgot about the Cinnabon. Yeah. I was just thinking pretzels. Yeah, absolutely. The Cinnabon smell. Oh my gosh. Walking into, what was it, Westminster Mall back in the day, and the Cinnabon smell was just
Oh yeah.
in your nostrils.
Yes.
What about Costco?
Oh, pizza.
Nice, yeah.
Yes.
I'm disappointed that they stopped serving churros, though. I'm gonna be bitter about that
Oh,
forever.
you can absolutely be better. Okay, Avery. Ren Fair.
Oh, the giant turkey leg.
Yeah, you got it. Baseball game.
Popcorn, hot dogs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking hot dogs.
Yeah,
Okay, those are the two that I had for you.
nice, yeah. Also, I can name a food and you can name the party that it's kind of related to, or the vibe, or the dress code even.
Okay, okay.
So we got a charcuterie board and wine.
Uh, at a like a book club or something, or just a hangout.
Okay, yeah, something casual, but also something formal. It's kind of flexible,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
Hot dogs and burgers.
Barbecue.
Yeah.
Cookout. 4th of July.
Oh, yeah, mhm.
Yep.
Wedding cake and champagne,
Classic wedding.
and a birthday cake, of course.
Yes, birthday party. Some people, I had a coworker once who did not like cake. And so
Okay,
every year on her birthday, they made her a birthday pie instead of a birthday
okay.
cake, which was kind of fun.
That makes a lot of sense. Some pies are really, yeah, a lot better. I Birthday cake is honestly, it's just kind of like plastic sometimes to me. It's not
Yeah.
really like, it's very symbolic and not very memorable sometimes. But a lot of the birthday cakes that I had at like Asian kind of parties or
Hmm.
Asian gatherings, it would be like a fruit cake. We would always do the like a fruit cake from a local bakery.
Nice. So for Asian parties, was it less sweet than kind of a Western style birthday cake? It has the really sometimes sickeningly sweet frosting.
Oh god, yeah, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
American birthday cakes, the frosting is just it just feels like plastic sugar. I don't know how else to describe it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I had a lot of fruit cakes because the fruit it would be like fresh fruit. There'd be like a sugar glaze on top, and then the pie or the cake underneath it, it would be kind of like a pastry pie with like some custard cream as well.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and you can still light a candle, you can still ice, happy birthday on it, but there's just like a yeah, I don't know, a lot of fruit at those kind of parties.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, and then my last one is mooncakes at a Mid-Autumn Festival. That's definitely a very strong highlight for those, Asian Mid-Autumn festivals that got those yummy, yummy foods.
Mooncakes. Yum, yum, yum,
Yum,
yum.
yum, yum.
So, another thing that we can talk about is the idea of time management, using resources, being responsible, whether this is a board game or a video game or some other kind of experience or maybe a cooking class or something like that. So, a couple of board games. There's viticulture, the classic viticulture where you are running a vineyard and a winery, and you have to go through each step of making wine. You have to grow the grapes, you have to crush the grapes, you have to age the wine, and only then can you fulfill the orders. And it's a worker placement game, so you got to place one worker to do each of those things, and you got to make sure that you have the trellis if you're growing a certain kind of grape, or irrigation if you're growing a different kind of grape. So that teaches you about that. Kitchen Rush. Kitchen Rush is a game where you are, again, attempting to fill orders. That's sort of like a common theme. Are you going to fill these orders? And so you have sand timers that you got to flip over and then get something done before the sand runs out, and then flip it over again. And it's supposed to kind of simulate what's going on in the kitchen and how there's a real time element to it. I just started watching the show The Bear. And so Kitchen Rush, well, I guess more properly, The Bear was kind of reminding me of playing Kitchen Rush with my friend Matthew in a way, because they're like, they're calling for things. It's almost like a surgeon, Avery, like a surgeon saying scalpel, or, pan, or 50 cc's of whatever the heck. We're going to do a whole other show about playing medicine and playing science. But
Yeah.
the idea of cooking and calling for things, asking for things because you're so concentrated on what's going on. And then there's kind of a playful movement called the slow food movement, which is supposed to be a counter to fast food. There's transparency regarding where the food comes from and how it's prepared, and there's a little bit of a history or a narrative to what you're getting. This was parodied in an episode of Portlandia. I think it was the first episode of Portlandia, where there was a couple that sat down and they got different profiles of cows that they were thinking of having in their burgers. And so the cow's history and where it was. And then they said, well, can we actually go to the farm and meet the cow that's going to be our burger? It was pretty funny. And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the restaurant at the end of the universe. They also had, this was before Portlandia and probably actually before anything having to do with like farm to table or slow food. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the living creatures that were the meat were rolled out on a cart, and they were talking animals, and so they talked to the people who were considering eating them, and they would explain to the person how their flesh was tender and they thought they would be a wonderful meal, and so you got to kind of like meet your meat in the restaurant at the end of the universe.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And all right, for the second time in 2 months, I have to mention the show Delicious in Dungeon. And the the idea, so here's the responsibility part. Use of resources. Don't waste any part of the monsters unless it's inedible, and then try to find something else to do with it. Or grow crops on golems and make sure that you're using them in a way that's not just treating them as monsters. There's also, you talked about sort of the trope in video games and RPGs where you rest around the campfire and you regenerate your hit points and stuff like that. So typically the party in Delicious in Dungeon can only stop to eat after they've had this big battle. And so part of the celebration of the battle is wow, this monster is going to taste really good. So those are playful ways that I thought of about thinking about how much time does it take, slowing things down, being responsible, using resources. So what do you think, Avery? What you got?
I grew up playing a lot of restaurant and time management computer and video games. I was slightly obsessed with them, to be completely honest. Like the Flash games of the 2000s and 2010s, like games like Penguin Diner, where you're penguins in a penguin restaurant and you're a server and you wear like little ice skates to float around and, serve all these little penguins. There's the burger restaurant series. There was Papa's Pizzeria and all the other IA series of Papa, like Freezeria, Papa's Pancakeria, etc. There's like a ton, like Donuteria, all other genres of food, and you just kind of put together orders, like make the food correctly, and then if your customers are happy, they'll tip you well. There was a game on Miniclip, which was another Flash game website. It was called Sushi Go Round, and my siblings and I were obsessed with this game. We played it so much. It was so satisfying to put the ingredients on the little wooden sushi roll thing, and then you click it when you're ready, and then it rolls it up for you, and then you've got these neat little sushi rolls that you can give to all your hungry, hungry little customers. And a lot of people of my generation will remember this game called 625 Sandwich Stacker, which was on the Disney Channel website. It was from the Lilo and Stitch universe where this character, he's like a little alien monster. He's working in a sandwich shop, and you're basically you move him like left to right on screen, and you're just catching falling sandwich ingredients. And you want to catch the good ones, like the lettuce and the cheese, but you don't want to catch the stinky ones, like the rotten cheese or like a boot or something. And then every level ends when you get the second piece of bread on top, and then you just have like a really tall, wobbling, massive, really inedible yet really successful sandwich. And throughout all these games, there's kind of the idea of serve the customers before they become too impatient. Like they usually have kind of hearts above their heads or a meter above them to describe how patient they are. And then once they run out of patience, they just leave the store, and then you kind of lose out on that profit. So similar to our Playing Wealth episode, you are basically trying to make the most kind of profit. And some other games recently that I've played have included Cook, Serve, Delicious, which basically tests your reaction times with you're serving all these customers, but you're just pressing like different keyboard buttons on your keyboard. It's kind of like a typing game, honestly. If you combine a typing game with a cooking game, make it really stressful. Dave the Diver, I've mentioned a couple times. You personally fish all of the fish that you're going to serve in your sushi restaurant that evening. So you have to budget your time and see, how many fish that you can carry in one go. And I got my wisdom teeth taken out the other week, so I spent a lot of time playing a bunch of games. So one of them was called Taste Maker. You're the restaurant builder, restaurant creator, manager, what have you, and your goal is to just expand and balance your spending and your profiting. And the progress was so addicting because you get to a spot where you just add your first couple tables, you add your first cooking station, and then once you're in a spot where you're getting regular customers and getting enough money, the natural thing is you just want to add more. You want to be able to have more customers in your store. You want to have a bigger restaurant. You want to add a second level, and you just kind of want to keep expanding, even though expansion comes with all these growing challenges of, oh no, I have to add more employees now. Oh no, I have to have another freezer now, blah, blah, blah. Like, it teaches you a lot about like balancing kind of, well, not even running a real business, because of course I'm not prepared to run a real restaurant, Drew. Like, I will not. I know if I'm saying that I've played all these games all my life, but I am not prepared to run a real restaurant. But that's the fun part about playing games, is that it takes kind of some aspects of that and simplifies it to an enjoyable medium. And then a multiplayer game that a lot of people know is called Overcooked, which is designed for chaos and teamwork on the Nintendo Switch or other platforms now. And it's chaotic because you and your other players that you're playing with are trying to coordinate yourselves because there's only you have to delegate certain things to certain people, and so there's kind of the chaos within that. And there's some funny videos on the internet of people, like, you just see that the game is just paused on the TV, and then one person is standing up and lecturing everybody else passionately about what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and what needs to be improved. And they're talking really seriously and like really angrily oftentimes, and it's just really funny because they're taking this game so seriously. And sometimes it's because like they're actually chefs in real life, or they're in a leadership position in real life, or something like that. But yeah, this game really challenges your leadership skills and also your role playing, desires, because you can also be like, yes, chef, I'll help you out. Like role play that you're just a good team together.
Ah. Oh man, it's amazing how some of these things become rehearsal for life
Yeah.
and or rehearsal for what you don't want your life to be. Like you said, I some of these experiences show me that I don't want to open a restaurant or all kinds of or I really okay in Stardew Valley. I enjoy farming. I am working on enjoying fishing, but really honestly in my real life, I don't know that I would want to run to my farm, run to do some fishing, run to the mines, forage and all it. It's very cozy and the ways that you get food are pretty fascinating, but again, it shows you sort of like, okay, this is my play life and this is my lived life. And I don't know that it's sometimes there's crossover and sometimes there's not. How
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
competition? So, oh my goodness,
Mm,
we love our competitive cooking shows. Before we get to that,
yeah.
I just want to mention hot dog eating contests, pie eating contests, going back to the excess and waste and that idea, or food fights and just the absolute taking food and just being ridiculous with it, right? Being over the top. The show Hot Ones and progressively eating hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter hot sauce and watching people, usually celebrities, just get absolutely pained and try to figure out, oh my gosh, like I didn't think this hot sauce was going to be this hot. And do you need milk? Do you need water? Do you need a moment? And there's kind of an extreme nature of this, like extreme sports or things like that. Sometimes I have been in a cooking class where I think people have gotten a little bit competitive about how close did I get to making the item the way it was modeled for us? Did I get that tortilla exactly like the tortilla that rose up on the little cooking stone and had the beautiful little bubbles and things like that? And just trying to, there's a situation where you're trying to recreate. You're learning a recipe for the first time, and so you're not really ready to be improvisational with it yet, to put your own spin on it. You're simply learning how to recreate what the person has done. But Avery, there are a number of different shows. What are some of your favorites?
In a lot of cooking shows, there's going to be, well, actually, in all cooking competitions, there's going to be the cast of people that are involved, such as the participants, the host, who actually acts kind of like a Joker figure, where they can be serious, they can be comedic, dramatic. They are basically the guide between the audience and the experience. And then there's the judges, who usually they come from some sort of background or expertise. And I like to compare the Great British Bake Off with a lot of other American cooking shows, because when you describe American cooking competition shows, you're like competing among other professionals. The participants are professional chefs in their lives, or they're trying to start up a restaurant. The cash prizes are in the hundreds of thousands, or the prizes is like, you get to have your own restaurant that we help you open. The shows can be very cutthroat. There's often judgment, harsh criticism, and just kind of a lot of really high stakes. And one of the cooking shows that I watched a good amount, like growing up, was Cutthroat Kitchen, hosted by Alton Brown, where it's in the title. It's cutthroat. You, as a participant, have the opportunity to spend your potential prize money to sabotage other participants next to you. And there were things like my competitor has to like bury a turkey 3 times. Like, it's ridiculous. It's very silly, like very playful and fun to watch. Like, I think the episodes might have been themed around different things. Like, if um if it's like a summer fair themed one, like maybe you can pay to have somebody else have to bob for the apples that they have to cook with, and and other almost torturous stuff along those lines too. So it's at that point the competition is mingled with the skill, but it's also mingled with the game itself of how am I going to budget my prize money to sabotage other people and try to win. And then it's even better though when the participants did not use any of their money to sabotage other people, because that was also sometimes a theme there. There were some people who wouldn't do that. And then when they won, that was infinitely more satisfying to me because that meant that they also had they didn't need to sabotage other people in order to win the competition. I thought that was really impressive. But my favorite cooking show of all time is definitely the Great British Bake Off, which is, British. And it's a competition among amateurs, and the color scheme is pastels. So that kind of explains it all. And the prize for this show is every season is that it's a cake stand and a flower bouquet, and that's the prize that you get once you win at the top out of 12 bakers. And the participants over the course of the episodes, they clearly become close to each other and they have a sense of camaraderie and care and concern for each other. My favorite moments include when one baker is like done with their dish, but another is struggling to finish in time, so the first baker will rush over and say, "How can I help?" because they're British. Or if another baker messes up and makes a huge accident and they're like, "Oh my god, what have I done?" And another baker will instantly come over and help. Or maybe not even one, but like several bakers will come over and help the person out and be like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And they will comfort each other. They'll be like, "It's all right. Like, mistakes and accidents happen. Keep cracking on. Try again. You still have time. You're going to be able to do this." And even the hosts of this show, they kind of walk around and interview people as they do their cooking. The hosts crack jokes with everybody themselves too, and they're also always ready to gently comfort the bakers when they're having an emotional breakdown, because these cooking shows are an emotional experience. And I think we have a lot of sympathy for these bakers because, I mean, of their background, because they're amateurs. Like, they're not professional bakers yet. And the whole design of the show is designed for us to feel emotional with them or empathetic with them and want them to succeed and want them to help each other out. And it's just a really wholesome experience. And I want more competitive shows like that. I want more kindness in competition. I think that's what really speaks to me. But of course, there are people who love shows like Cutthroat Kitchen and all that. So there's always something for everybody, of
I
course.
love that in Great British Bake Off, there's the world of the tent.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that they're just always talking about here in the tent, or when I get back to the tent, or the judges have stepped outside the tent. And I mean,
Yeah.
clearly the tent is the stage, and it's always in some beautiful kind of like, old manor or a beautiful garden or something like that. And it just I
Yeah.
love the world, like you talked about the pastels, and I love the have you cleaned your counter? Do you keep your counter clean? And it's just it creates such an amazing world, and the satisfaction when somebody gets a Hollywood handshake is just
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just be and their faces just light up. Or when Paul Hollywood comes and he praises somebody's dish and then they don't get a Hollywood handshake. And
Yeah.
I full on admit this, Avery. Sometimes I sit there and I say, "Why was that not a handshake bake? Why?" It's just, yeah, I know. I get very into that too.
Yeah. Oh, and I think the show represents the power of high stakes in different ways because, like I said, there's not a huge cash money prize. There's no reward other than intrinsic pride and just success and
Yeah.
accomplishment according to your own standards too. And it's just an example that you can make a great entertainment experience without the stakes being something that's completely an object, not a thing. You know, the reward is not a
Oh,
thing
right.
or it's not wealth. The reward is something inside your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not something that's kind of manufactured, right?
Yeah.
It's not something like you were talking about. Okay, well now you have to put a rutabaga in your dish or something like that. It's just very, I mean, there is a structure to it, and there's the signature and the showcase, and then the technical. I put them in the wrong order.
That's okay.
Signature, technical,
Oh yeah.
showstopper, not showcase. Obviously, when are we getting the new season? Obviously, I've forgotten all my Bake Off terminology. But there's a structure to it, but they don't typically sort of like throw a curveball at you or try something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so we also just wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about the gendered nature of cooking, of food, of drink sometimes. I made a couple notes here. I think I'm going to come back to the great Anthony Bourdain, and I think that one of the things that Anthony Bourdain kind of put out there was that there could be a certain type of masculinity associated with cooking and eating, that it wasn't an inherently kind of feminine pursuit. And yes, there are some struggles with that because it's like, all right, well, now the boys get to think it's cool. But I think that Bourdain had a really interesting way of bringing a sense of what does it mean to be a man and be a chef and always be curious. So he's always going to be one of my favorites, and I really miss him. Guy Fieri, and the sort of like diners, drive-ins and dives, and the kind of like road food, or just the process of going to places that aren't fancy, and kind of allowing that, right, bringing sort of, I guess, masculinity to, all right, let's go see what we can find that's good food but also down to earth, like not fancy. And then of course Gordon Ramsay, the iconic chef who's going to scream at you, chef who's going to say this is not good enough. I mean, the man just exudes testosterone everywhere he goes, right? It's like this is a competition. Are you strong enough? Are you fast enough? Are you talented enough to keep up with what Gordon Ramsay needs you to do? And so there there definitely has been kind of a change in the gendered aspect of cooking and eating and appreciating. And then I also wanted to throw out there, in terms of drink, coffee. I almost see coffee as like the great gendered equalizer. No matter who you are, no matter how you see yourself, probably you will like coffee. It is kind of democratizing. It's something that a lot of people share. It's a little more kind of widespread, especially during the day than alcohol. People go to coffee shops to go on dates. People go to coffee shops to have work meetings. People start their day with a coffee from their favorite drive-through or their favorite counter, place. And it really kind of I mean, obviously you have to have enough disposable income to buy coffee rather than making it yourself. Like this morning, I made coffee for myself and my partner with my little drip coffee maker at home, but it's almost become a ritual that crosses a lot of different lines, as opposed to something like the gender divide that I continue to see between beer and wine. And masculinity is associated with beer and femininity is associated with wine. Now, of course, there are, exceptions to this, but when I see a group of sort of like, guys, they'll often be talking about beer and the microbreweries that they know and kind of what the advertising is like, what the taste is like, what they like eating with the beer to kind of enhance it. I don't know if it's the bubbles. I don't know if guys like bubbles or what's going on, but there's or maybe it's unfussy, and that's something that guys are into in the sort of standard masculinity. And then women I see becoming fascinated with wine. And are you a red wine person? Are you a white wine person? Are you a Chardonnay person? And going and chatting with the girls at the wine bar, or bringing wine to a girls' hangout or something like that. And I don't know, again, whether there's a sophistication that's associated with that, or whether there's a kind of a history of time and care and heritage and culture that's prevalent, and that's something that there's a feminine aspect that's sort of connected to that. I don't know, but I still continue to see that divide. So that's what I thought about. What do you think?
Absolutely. Now I need a t-shirt that says, I like beer because of the bubbles. Not that I like any alcohol at all, but just because that is so quotable, Drew. In a lot of how we think of cooking and food, there have always been a lot of gender stereotypes with how cooking itself. I don't know though, like you say, like all those male chefs that you just said, cooking professionally is oftentimes described as male dominated, whereas cooking with a stay-at-home role is described as female dominated. And not even just cooking, but also cleaning and laundry and grocery shopping and preparing food as well, and then cleaning after you eat the food and setting up the table. Like there's so much history around those gender roles and how they are expected to play out in our lives. Some of the games that I've played as a kid, like Cooking Mama and the Delicious series, like they both had a very female guide lens to it, where Cooking Mama was super cute. It's like a little Nintendo game, and you use your little stylus to make little dishes and stir your eggs and create the dishes, and then your mama is like, "Yay, good job, you did good." And then in the Delicious Flash game, you're like following this woman named Emily, her restaurants, her life as a woman. Like the story of this game is also with like her family, her dating life, her marriage, moving homes, and having a baby. And that's just kind of the feminization of those cooking games as well. And then you also think of like fake kitchen sets. You buy your kid this little plastic stove with like these plastic cooking pots and like little cabinets, and it's very gendered in that way. But a show that I like recently that has kind of defied those gender stereotypes is, it's a manga as well as an anime. It's called The Way of the House Husband. It features a former Yakuza who is a stay-at-home husband now, and he wins the hearts of others through his food and compassion. And he appears intimidating at first. Like, he has a ton of tattoos, but they're hidden underneath his all black clothing and his sunglasses. He has a huge scar on his face, and his rare smile is like terrifying. Even though he permanently wears an apron with it's a beige apron with a derpy cartoon Shiba dog face on it with like its tongue sticking out the side. Like, he wears this every day, all the time, inside, outside, to the store, everywhere. It is so funny when you think about like this scary, scary man wearing this goofy little apron all the time, and nobody comments on it. It's just like part of him. And others still are terrified of him when they first see him, whether they know him or not, because even if they do know him, like if he runs into former or current Yakuza members, they know his reputation. He was called the Immortal Dragon. And right before this show started, he basically took out an entire gang chapter all by himself in like a very violent way. And now he's just a house husband. Make that make sense. But now he doesn't automatically resort to violence to resolve conflict anymore, while the others that he used to associate with almost always do. And so there's a symbolism of a weapon like the knife, that he uses this knife to prepare really, really good, amazing food for others. And instead of hurting people, he uses his knife to heal and connect with other people. And his food is really, really good, according to all the other characters of the show. Like, the power of good food is infinite, according to this show. And the good food that he makes reflects his internal good heart. So even though others are terrified of him at first sight, he lets them know through his food and his like acts of kindness that others are safe to be around him. Although this story would actually be completely different if his food was terrible. Because even if he had the same passion for it and was still trying to connect, even if his intentions were still the same and his food was terrible, everybody would have a continuous negative interpretation of him. And I think it's kind of makes me a little sad, but also, like, it's such a hilarious show. Like, I recommend it so highly. But it makes me sad because what about all the people who are not amazing chefs, but are still trying to win over the hearts of others? What happens then?
Yeah. And I was just thinking about the trope of magic things being baked into food or being put in food. And you were talking about if his food wasn't good, then it would be different. And I just flashed on the movie like Water for Chocolate. You mentioned Alice in Wonderland way, way, way in the beginning. And like Water for Chocolate is the cook can put almost like making potions or putting potions into food. This is a movie from like the 90s, I think. And then people are controlled by what they eat. Like, people will fall in love if she put that particular recipe in, or all kinds of other things. And so that's pretty fascinating. The power and the magic that is in something that is specifically created.
Yeah, and even if the magic itself is just love.
Yeah, absolutely. How many times have we heard the secret ingredient is love? I mean, like, there's so many times when somebody, and the whole idea of a secret ingredient, the Coca-Cola company having their recipe locked in a vault that is more secure than a lot of like banks or other institutions that have really valuable and important secrets. And it's fascinating. I found a great quote as we're kind of moving toward final thoughts here from one of my other favorite chefs of all time, Julia Child. I used to watch Julia Child on PBS with my mom when I was a kid. And I know that now she's kind of iconic and everybody thinks about her warbly voice and the fact that she wanted butter and everything. But she was really important, an important step in making people realize how important food and cooking are, and that they can be a way of learning about yourself and learning about others as well. So Julia Child said, I was 32 when I started cooking. Up until then, I just ate. And I kind of love that idea of starting to pay attention to what we do every day. And I'll tell a little story. My grandfather, grandpa, so he was my mom's dad. He had a special recipe, stuffing recipe, that he would make every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. And he had worked on this recipe over the years and tinkered with it and made it different. One of the things that he did was he put almonds and raisins in with kind of the classic stuffing recipe, and that gave it a little bit of a different flavor. And so years and years he would tinker with this. And now Grandpa is gone, and so my cousin Kate now is the person who makes the stuffing all the time. And she has made her own changes. And she has taken that page of stuff that he wrote down and has scratched stuff off and brought new things. And so the idea that you can kind of like look back into the past. When I eat this stuffing, right, at Thanksgiving or at a family gathering, it immediately brings me back to when Grandpa was there. And when he would like take the stuffing out of the bird and put it in a bowl and that kind of thing. And the taste just immediately brings me back to being a kid and having him there sort of like presiding over the cooking of the Thanksgiving meal or whatever. And it also kind of helps me look into the future. And I think about, okay, well, who's going to be the next person who's going to take this recipe and do something with it? And is one of Kate's kids going to take it and make new changes to it? So I really started at some point, maybe in my 30s, like Julia Child, paying attention to and appreciating that has to happen. We have to eat. We have to eat, and someone has to cook, whether it's us or whether it's someone cooking for us. And the appreciation of that, the appreciation of what cooking and eating and drinking bring to our life every day. Stopping to eat, and the idea that it becomes something more than you have to do this. It transitions into you get to do this. And so food and drink become an opportunity for wonder, for adventure, for connection with the people around you, and also a way to think about yourself and how you see yourself through the things that you cook, the things that you eat, the restaurants that you go to, and the people who you love who go with you.
That's a really beautiful way of putting it, Drew.
Thanks, Avery.
I recently went back to California to visit my family, and I had this one bowl of bom riu, which is like a Vietnamese noodle dish that's like a tomato and shrimp kind of soup base. I teared up when I smelled it, and I didn't realize that I had missed it so much, and I cannot wait to go back home and have another bowl of that, because it reminded me of my mother's cooking and my sense of home. And there's a lot of connotations with kind of just like the kindness and the service and the generosity of cooking for your loved ones that just has really always stuck with me. And I'm just really fortunate that I've been able to have a lot of that in my life. And I, of course, always wish and hope that other people are able to experience that kindness through food as well. This has been Powered by Play with Avery and Drew. If you've been enjoying this podcast, you can support us online at Ko-fi. That is ko-fi.com/poweredbyplay. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.